9 years. 9 years she raised a child alone. No explanation, no farewell, not a single message from the man to whom she had given her heart. 9 years she believed she had escaped that world forever. But tonight, Roman DeLuca walked into the restaurant where she worked, no longer the young boy he once was. He was the boss, and his eyes were fixed on her 9-year-old daughter. If you want to know what happens next, hit like, comment the city you're watching from so I know how far this story has progressed. And don't go anywhere. The night it all came apart started the way most disasters do, quietly, without warning, disguised as something ordinary. Isabella Hart was 40 minutes into a double shift at Marcello's when the front door opened and let in a gust of November air cold enough to sting. She didn't look up right away. She was carrying 3 plates of linguine, navigating between a party of 6 and a couple celebrating something she didn't care about, her jaw tight from smiling too long and her lower back already knotting up beneath her uniform. Table 7 wanted more bread. Table 12 was going to complain about the risotto again. She could feel it. She set the plates down, adjusted her pen behind her ear, turned toward the host stand to check the reservation list. And then she saw him. Roman DeLuca stood at the entrance of the restaurant like he owned the floor he was standing on. Because in a city like New York, men like him usually did. He was dressed in a charcoal overcoat that probably cost more than Isabella made in 2 months. His dark hair cut shorter than she remembered, but the jaw the same, the posture the same. That particular stillness he carried like a weapon still exactly the same. He was flanked by 2 men who stayed half a step behind him the way shadows stay behind a lamp. His eyes swept the room the way a man sweeps a room when he's always checking for exits. He hadn't seen her yet. Isabella's body understood the danger before her mind did. Her stomach dropped. Her hands went cold. The pen behind her ear slipped, and she caught it without thinking, crushing it so hard the plastic cracked against her palm. 9 years. 9 years, and he walked in like he was returning from a long weekend. She turned before he could find her face in the crowd, moving fast toward the back hallway near the kitchen, keeping her shoulders square and her walk steady because she was good at that. She'd spent 9 years getting good at that. The kitchen noise hit her like a wave. Steam. The clatter of steel pans, someone shouting about a missed pickup on table 3. She pressed her back against the tile wall beside the walk-in cooler and let herself breathe. One breath, then another. She was being irrational. Maybe it wasn't him. Maybe she was confusing a face in a dark restaurant with a face she hadn't let herself think about in years. Maybe Isabella. Marco, the floor manager, appeared around the corner with his reading glasses pushed up on his forehead and a look on his face like she'd just set something on fire. Table 9 just got seated. 4 guests, one of them specifically requested you. Her mouth was dry. Who requested me? Marco shrugged the shrug of a man who didn't want to get involved in whatever he was sensing. The gentleman at the front said he knew you. Big tipper, apparently. Danny already tried to take the table and the guy asked for you by name. Isabella looked down at her notepad. Her handwriting on the top page blurred slightly. She blinked it clear. Fine, she said. Give me a minute. She went to the narrow bathroom at the end of the hall, ran cold water over her wrists, and stared at herself in the mirror. 32 years old. Dark circles she'd stopped trying to hide with concealer. Hair pulled back in a knot that had started the evening neat and was now losing the fight with humidity. The faint scar on her chin from a car accident 6 years ago, the one that Lily liked to touch with 2 fingers and ask about, the story changing slightly every time Isabella told it, so it was always just a little less scary. Lily. The name landed in her chest like a stone dropped into deep water. She dried her hands, straightened her collar, walked back out onto the floor. Roman was seated at table 9, his overcoat folded over the back of the chair, a glass of water in front of him untouched. The 2 men who'd come in with him were at a separate table nearby, close enough to matter. He was reading the menu when she approached. She made herself stop 2 feet from the table, weight balanced, notepad open. Good evening, she said. Can I start you with something to drink? He lowered the menu. The look on his face when he saw her was not the look she'd been bracing for. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't calculated. It was something rawer than that. A flicker of something he couldn't quite control before the walls came up, and the stillness settled back in. Just a second. But she saw it. "Isabella," he said. His voice was the same. That was the part she hadn't prepared for. Lower, maybe, worn in at the edges, but the same. "Mr. DeLuca," she said, "what can I get you?" Not a question. She kept her eyes on the notepad. A silence stretched between them like a wire pulled too tight. "Sit down," he said. "I'm working." "I know you're working. Sit down anyway." She didn't. She kept the pen moving against the notepad like she was writing something, though she wasn't writing anything. "We have a very good Barolo tonight, if you're interested. The kitchen is also doing a branzino that's—" "Isabella," his voice dropped. Not threatening, quieter than that. "I'm not here for dinner." "Then you're taking up a table on a Friday night for no reason, which means I'm going to need to ask you to—" "I drove past you," he said. 3 weeks ago, on West 44th. You were walking with a little girl." Everything in her went absolutely still. "You were holding her hand," he continued, his voice low and even, like a man who'd rehearsed the words 100 times to make sure they came out without breaking. "She had on a yellow coat. She was arguing with you about something. I couldn't hear what, but she looked up at you and laughed, and I—" He stopped. His jaw tightened. "I pulled over. I watched you for almost 10 minutes. Isabella's pen stopped moving. "She has my eyes," Roman said. The restaurant noise continued around them, the clink of glasses, the murmur of other people's conversations, the distant sound of the kitchen. All of it reduced to something abstract and far away, like sound heard through water. "I think," Isabella said carefully, "that you should leave." "I'm not leaving." "Roman, how old is she?" "You need to go." "How old?" His voice didn't rise. That was the thing about Roman DeLuca. He'd never needed to raise his voice to make a room go quiet. The stillness did it. The absolute certainty that whatever he said next would matter. "I need you to tell me right now how old that little girl is." Isabella looked at him for the first time since she'd walked to the table. Really looked at him. The lines at the corners of his eyes. The way his hands rested flat on the table, very deliberately flat, like he was making a point of not making fists. The vein at his jaw, the one that only showed when he was holding something at the edge of his control. 9 years, and she still knew every tell he had. "This isn't the place," she said quietly. Something shifted in his face. "So there's something to tell." She said nothing. Which was, she realized the instant she said nothing, the same as saying everything. Roman sat back. He let out a breath through his nose, slow, deliberate, and looked at the ceiling for exactly 2 seconds before bringing his eyes back to her. Whatever he was feeling, whatever was moving through him in that moment, he pressed it down somewhere deep and locked it there. She could almost watch him do it. "I'll be outside," he said, "when your shift ends." "My shift ends at midnight." "Then I'll be outside at midnight." He stood, buttoned his jacket, and left $200 on a table where he'd had nothing but water. Isabella stood there for a moment after he walked out, her notepad in her hand and her pen leaving ink dots on the page where her hand was pressing too hard. Marco materialized at her elbow with the expression of a man piecing something together that he'd rather not have pieced together. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Fine," she said. "I'll take table 12's order now." She got through the rest of the shift. She didn't let herself think about the parking lot. She refilled water glasses and recited specials and smiled at people who were having evenings uncomplicated by the past. And she got through it the way she'd always gotten through things. By moving forward and not looking down, the way you cross a rope bridge in the dark. At 11:50, she texted her neighbor, Mrs. Calloway, who watched Lily when Isabella worked nights, and asked if she could stay an extra hour. Mrs. Calloway texted back 3 seconds later with a thumbs-up emoji and a note that Lily had eaten 2 bowls of cereal for dinner and was currently asleep with the TV on. Isabella read the message twice. Thought about her daughter's face when she slept, the way her mouth went soft, the way her lashes lay against her cheek, the dark hair spread across the pillow. Roman's hair, Roman's lashes. She'd always known it. She'd never let herself say it out loud. She clocked out, got her coat from the back, and pushed through the service exit into the alley. The cold hit her immediately, the kind of November cold that gets into the bones and stays there. She came around to the front of the building on 53rd Street, and he was there, exactly where he said he'd be, leaning against a black SUV with his hands in his coat pockets and his breath making small clouds in the air. The two men from earlier were inside the vehicle. Roman had positioned himself a few feet away from it. She noted that. He'd wanted this to not feel like an ambush. The effort was visible. That was something. They stood on the sidewalk and looked at each other while the city moved around them. Taxis, headlights, a couple arguing on the opposite corner, the distant rhythm of the subway beneath the street. "Start talking," he said. "What do you want to know?" "Everything." His voice was flat. "Start with her name." Isabella wrapped her coat tighter. "Lily." A muscle in his jaw moved. "How old?" 9. He turned away from her for a moment, toward the street, and she watched the line of his shoulders and the way his head dropped slightly, and she thought, despite everything, despite the 9 years and the silence and the choices she'd made, she thought she saw the shape of something breaking in him, quietly. The way things broke in men who didn't know how to let themselves break. 9 years, he said, still facing the street. "Yes. You knew when... I found out 6 weeks after you disappeared," she said. "So yes, I knew." He turned back. "I didn't disappear." The laugh that came out of her was short and humorless. "Roman, I was sent away." His jaw was tight. "My father, there were things happening with the family, with... It doesn't matter now. I was sent to Sicily for 18 months, and when I came back, you were gone. Your apartment was empty. Your number was disconnected. You vanished. You could have found me. I tried." "Not hard enough," she said. The words came out flat. She hadn't meant them to come out flat. Somewhere under them was the full weight of 9 years. The nights in the first trimester when she was sick and alone and terrified. The delivery room where she'd held her own hand. The first year of Lily's life survived on almost nothing. The sheer daily accumulation of raising a child alone. But she pressed all of that down, because this sidewalk wasn't the place for it, and Roman DeLuca didn't get to see what his absence had cost her. Not tonight, maybe not ever. "I have a daughter," he said, like he was trying the sentence out, seeing if it held weight. "You have nothing," Isabella said quietly. "I have a daughter. Lily is mine. She doesn't know you exist." "That's going to change." "The hell it is Isabella. She is 9 years old, and her life is normal and safe, and she goes to school, and she has friends, and she doesn't know anything about what your family is or what you do, and I will not..." She stopped herself, forced her breathing level. "I will not let her anywhere near what you are." Roman was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, lower, stripped of the performance that usually lived in it. "I know what I am," he said. "I've always known. But I need you to understand something." He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the frost their breath made between them. "I'm not asking your permission. I'm telling you that I know, and I'm telling you that I intend to be part of her life. You don't get to decide that. I'm her father. Where were you when she had pneumonia at 3 years old?" The words came out before she could stop them. "Where were you when she broke her wrist falling off the monkey bars? Where were you for the nightmares, for the first day of school, for every single night she asked me why she didn't have a dad?" Her voice stayed low, but something in it shook at the edges. "You don't get to show up 9 years later and claim something you had no part in building." He didn't flinch. She would have felt better if he had. "You're right," he said. That stopped her. "You're right about all of it," he said again. "I wasn't there. I didn't build anything. I don't know what I'm asking for or what I deserve, but I stood on a sidewalk 3 weeks ago and I watched my daughter laugh and I haven't slept since." He paused. "I'm asking you to let me in slowly. Let me earn something, that's all." Isabella looked at the man standing in front of her and tried to reconcile him with the boy she'd loved at 22. Reckless and brilliant and entirely too beautiful and heading somewhere dark even then, even when she'd let herself pretend otherwise. The man in front of her wasn't pretending anything. That was the difference. That was the part that scared her more than the power and the bodyguards and the empire his family name carried. He meant it, and she had no idea what to do with that. "I need time," she said finally. "I can give you time. And I need you to promise me that she doesn't come anywhere near your world. The business, the people, none of it touches her." "Agreed." She studied his face. "Don't make me promises you can't keep, Roman." "I'm not." She looked at him a moment longer. Then she pulled her coat collar up against the cold and turned toward the street. She'd taken 3 steps when he said her name. "Isabella." She stopped, but didn't turn around. "Thank you," he said, "for keeping her safe." The words landed somewhere in her chest she didn't want to examine too closely. She kept walking, took the subway home, let herself into the apartment quietly, checked on Lily, still asleep, the TV murmuring soft light across her face, and sat at the kitchen table for a long time after Mrs. Calloway left, hands wrapped around a mug of tea gone cold, staring at nothing. Lily was asleep 10 feet away. Roman DeLuca was back in her city. And for the first time in 9 years, Isabella Hart was not the only person on earth who knew the truth. She had 3 days before everything would crack open. She didn't know that yet. She thought she had time to think, time to plan, time to build some kind of controlled arrangement that kept Lily safe and kept Roman at arm's length and kept the 2 halves of her life from colliding. But the following Tuesday, Isabella arrived at school pickup 12 minutes late. A delayed subway, a customer who wouldn't let go of his check, the ordinary machinery of her ordinary life running slightly off. And when she reached the front gate of Lily's school, the other parents were already thinning out, and the teacher on duty was standing with a look on her face that made Isabella's legs go strange before she'd processed a single word. "Miss Hart," the teacher said, "Lily's not here." The cold came back then. Nothing like November air, nothing as simple as weather. This was a different kind of cold, the kind that starts behind the sternum and radiates outward. "What do you mean she's not here?" "She left with the other children on the East bus about 40 minutes ago, but..." The teacher was already pulling out her phone, her voice careful and measured in the way of someone trying not to escalate a situation they're already escalating. "We've had a report that the bus arrived and the other students got off, but Lily wasn't among them, and we haven't been able to reach you until now." Isabella was already dialing. Lily's phone rang 4 times and went to voicemail. She dialed again. Same. She turned and looked down the street as if looking hard enough would produce her daughter from the crowd of strangers, and the cold in her chest spread outward into her arms and her hands and the very tips of her fingers. She called Roman without letting herself think about it. He picked up on the first ring. "Lily's missing," she said. Her voice did not shake. She was distantly proud of that. "I need you to—" "I heard you," he said, and she could already hear the shift in him. The stillness going hard and cold and operational, a different kind of man than the one who'd stood on the sidewalk asking for time. "Where are you right now?" "Her school, East 77th. "Don't move," he said. "I'm 6 minutes away." The call ended. Isabella stood at the school gate and watched the street and held her phone against her chest and breathed the way she'd taught herself to breathe in the delivery room alone 9 years ago. Slowly, deliberately, because if she stopped controlling her breath, she would stop being able to control anything at all. 6 minutes had never felt so long in her life. Roman's SUV came around the corner on East 77th with the kind of controlled speed that said the driver had been told to hurry without being told to draw attention. It pulled against the curb, and Roman was out before it fully stopped, his coat open, moving with the long, deliberate stride of a man who had spent his adult life walking into rooms where things were already wrong. Isabella met him at the gate. She had her phone in both hands and her jaw set, and the teacher was still hovering 6 feet behind her with a clipboard she didn't know what to do with. "What do we know?" Roman said. Not a greeting, not a pause for anything. "She got on the East bus at 3:15. The bus arrived at the stop on Lexington and 73rd. The driver says she got off with the other kids." Isabella's voice was flat and precise. She'd been rehearsing the facts to keep herself from thinking past the facts. But the after-school coordinator at the building lobby says she never came upstairs. Nobody saw her after the bus stop. Roman looked at the teacher. "You have cameras on the bus?" The teacher blinked. "The district camera system is managed by... Do you have footage or not?" I, I'd need to contact the transportation office. Roman turned back to Isabella like the teacher had stopped existing. I need the exact address of the bus stop, and I need it now. Lexington and 73rd, northeast corner. He already had his phone to his ear. He spoke 2 sentences in a low voice that Isabella couldn't fully catch. A name, a location, the word now, and then lowered the phone and looked at her with an expression that wasn't reassurance, because Roman DeLuca didn't deal in false reassurance, never had. It was something colder and more useful than that. It was focus. My people are already pulling street camera footage from a 6-block radius, he said. It'll take 20 minutes. We should call the police. We will. He said it in a tone that meant after. Come with me. She didn't argue. She followed him to the SUV, got in the back seat while Roman took the front, and the vehicle moved before the door was fully closed. The teacher stood on the sidewalk behind them with her clipboard pressed to her chest and watched them go. The 20 minutes that followed were the worst of Isabella's life, which was saying something. She sat in the back seat of a moving vehicle surrounded by men she didn't know. Her daughter was somewhere in a city of 8 million people, and the only person she trusted to find Lily was a man she'd spent 9 years trying to unlove. Roman was on the phone for all 20 minutes, multiple calls, sometimes overlapping, switching between English and something else she caught fragments of. Not Italian, something harder. His network was wide, and she'd always known it was wide, but watching it move in real time was different. He spoke with the certainty of a man who expected to be obeyed and always was. She watched the back of his head and hated that it made her feel slightly less like she was falling. His phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. Something in the set of his shoulders shifted. We have her on camera, he said without turning around. Isabella's lungs opened. Where? She's walking. Willingly. With a man. He turned then, and the expression on his face was the careful, controlled expression of a man managing his own reaction in real time. She doesn't look scared. She looks like she knows him. She doesn't know anyone. She doesn't... I don't let her. Isabella stopped, reorganized. Who is he? I'm working on that. Roman. Who is he? I don't know yet. His voice was even. But I will in 10 minutes. The SUV stopped on 68th, and they waited in the vehicle while Roman's phone produced information the way that only happened when someone had built the right infrastructure over many years for exactly these moments. Isabella sat with her hands pressed together between her knees and looked out the window at a dry cleaner's, a pharmacy, a woman walking a small dog, the complete indifference of ordinary life continuing around the black hole that had opened up in hers. His name is Vincent Caruso, Roman said finally. His voice had gone flat in a way that was different from controlled. It was the flatness of recognition. He used to work for my father. Isabella heard the past tense. Used to. He was removed from the family 4 years ago. There were, he paused, disagreements about the direction of the business. He left with people who owed him loyalty and a list of grievances that I'm apparently only beginning to understand the scope of. Isabella stared at the back of his head. He knows about Lily. He knew before I did, apparently. The silence in the vehicle was different after that. You said she looked willing, Isabella said. Her voice came out strange and thin. You said she didn't look scared. On the camera footage, no. She's 9. If a man approached her and said, she stopped herself, because there were 100 ways to get a 9-year-old to go with you willingly, and every single one of them made her want to put her fist through the window. What did he tell her? I don't know yet. Damn it, Roman Sharon. I know. He said it quietly. It wasn't an apology. It was an acknowledgement of something that was going to require more than apology when there was time for it. I know. They found the building 40 minutes later, a warehouse conversion on the west side of the meatpacking district that a shell company with no obvious connection to Caruso had been renting for 6 months. Roman's people had pieced it together from camera footage and vehicle registrations and 2 phone calls that Isabella was deliberately not thinking too hard about in terms of what they'd required. Roman put his hand on the door handle and looked at her. You stay in the vehicle, he said. The hell I do. Isabella, she is my daughter, and I am not sitting in a car while... There are 3 men in that building, and I have 4. It's going to be loud and fast, and I need you not to be a variable. I'm managing." His voice was completely level. "When it's clear, I will come and get you myself. That is a promise. But right now I need you to stay here." She looked at him, at the jaw that was the same jaw Lily had, the eyes that were her daughter's eyes. This man she hadn't chosen to need and couldn't afford to trust, and was trusting anyway because there was simply nothing else to do. "If something happens to her," Isabella said, "nothing is going to happen to her." "If something, Isabella." He said her name the way he used to say it when they were young and she was spinning out and he needed her to land. Just the name, just the weight of it. "I've got her." He got out of the vehicle. What happened next took 9 minutes. She knew because she watched the clock on the SUV's dashboard and memorized every digit change with the obsessive precision of someone who has nothing to do but wait. The driver sat in the front seat and said nothing. Somewhere in the building, there were 2 sounds she chose not to identify, and then nothing. At minute 9, Roman came out the front door of the building with Lily in his arms. Isabella was out of the vehicle before it registered that she'd moved. Lily was alive. Lily was unhurt. Lily was wearing her yellow coat and her school backpack, and she was crying. Not the terrified crying of a child who's been harmed, but the exhausted, overwhelmed crying of a child who has been frightened and is now safe and needs to let the fear out. And she reached for Isabella the instant she was close enough, and Isabella took her and held her so hard she felt Lily's ribs against her own. "Mom." Lily's face was pressed into Isabella's neck. "Mom, I'm sorry. He said he was your friend. He said you sent him to get me because you were going to be late, and I—" "Shh. I know. It's okay. I've got you. I'm sorry." "You don't have anything to be sorry for." Isabella stroked her hair and kept her voice even and present and calm, because that was what Lily needed, and what Lily needed was the only thing that mattered. She pressed her mouth to the top of her daughter's head and breathed her in. "You're okay. I've got you." Over Lily's shoulder, she looked at Roman. He was standing 5 feet away with his hands at his sides, and his expression was something she'd never seen on his face before. Something unguarded and almost helpless. The expression of a man looking at something he cannot believe is real, and cannot believe he almost lost before he ever had it. He looked away before she could examine it further. They went back to the SUV. Lily sat between Isabella and the door, gradually quieting, her hand clenched in Isabella's coat. She kept her face slightly away from Roman. She didn't know who he was, had no frame of reference for him, and was processing too much to ask. Roman sat on the other side and looked straight ahead and didn't try to introduce himself or explain himself or be anything other than a very still presence at a measured distance. That restraint cost him something. Isabella could see that, and she filed it away without deciding what to do with it. They went to Isabella's apartment. Roman's people had already swept the building. She didn't ask how they'd gotten past the doorman, and Roman confirmed it was secure before letting them go upstairs. Isabella got Lily into pajamas and warmed soup that Lily barely touched, and sat on the edge of her bed until her daughter's breathing evened out and the grip on Isabella's hand gradually loosened and sleep finally took her. She sat there an extra 10 minutes after that just to be sure. Then she went to the kitchen. Roman was at the table. He'd taken off his coat. He had a glass of water in front of him that he wasn't drinking. He looked up when she came in and didn't say anything right away, which she was grateful for because she needed another 30 seconds before she could trust her own voice. She sat down across from him. "Caruso," she said. "Yes." "You knew he was out there." "I knew he was a problem. I didn't know—" He stopped, started again. "I didn't know the scope of it, and I didn't know he knew about Lily. That's on me." "Yes," she said. "It is." He took that. Didn't push back. "My intelligence was incomplete. I've been dealing with threats to the business, to the organization, and I thought I had a handle on where Caruso was and what he wanted." He set his jaw. "I was wrong." "So what does he want?" "Me." Roman's hands were flat on the table again. "He wants to dismantle what my father built and what I've maintained. He's been building toward something for 4 years. Tonight was—" He seemed to weigh the word. "Tonight was a message. He used my 9-year-old daughter as a message." "Yes." The quiet between them had weight and edges. He'll try again, Isabella said. Not a question. Yes. So what does that mean for Lily? Roman looked at her directly. It means she's not safe here. Not in this apartment, not at that school, not anywhere in her current routine until I've dealt with Caruso completely. Define dealt with. He said nothing, which was its own kind of definition. Isabella stood up and went to the window and looked out at the lights of the city. All those windows, all those lives going on in parallel, all that simultaneous ordinary human experience happening 6 stories below, while she stood in her kitchen trying to understand how she'd gotten here. She pressed her palm against the cold glass. I built this life to keep her away from exactly this, she said, quietly, to the window. 9 years. I made every choice with that in mind. Where I lived, where I worked, what I told her, what I didn't tell her. I know. And it took you 2 weeks to be back in my life for my daughter to get taken off a school bus by one of your enemies. The silence that followed that was the longest one yet. Yes, Roman said. He didn't flinch from it. She'd give him that. That's what happened. She turned from the window. I want you to know that I understand exactly what I'm about to do and what it costs me to do it. He watched her. Lily needs to be protected. I can't do that alone. I don't have the resources or the people or the... She stopped, made herself say it cleanly. I need your help, not because I want it, because right now it's the only thing that keeps her safe. I know. But I need you to understand something, Roman. She crossed the kitchen and stopped on the other side of the table from him and looked at him the way she used to look at him when she needed him to understand she wasn't playing. This is temporary. This is a practical arrangement and nothing else. You help me keep Lily safe until Caruso is gone, and then we renegotiate every single term of whatever this is from the beginning. My terms. Do you understand? He studied her for a long moment. Yes. And Lily doesn't know who you are. Not yet. Not until I decide she's ready to be told and I decide how she's told. Agreed. And I decide what access you have. I decide what's appropriate. You get input and I will consider it, but the final word is mine because I am her parent and have been her parent for 9 years, and you are... She stopped herself from saying what she'd been about to say. Rerouted. You are starting from 0. Something moved through his expression at that. Not anger, not exactly. More like someone pressing on a bruise to see if it still hurts. Agreed, he said again. She pulled out the chair and sat back down, put her hands on the table. So, tell me about Caruso. Everything. From the beginning. He told her. It took over an hour. She listened without interrupting, asking only precise and practical questions, not because she trusted him fully, but because she needed to understand the terrain of the danger her daughter was living inside of now, and Roman's information was the only map she had. He spoke with the blunt economy of a man who didn't dramatize, who had long since made his peace with the ugliness of the world he'd been born into and operated accordingly. He told her about the split with Caruso 4 years ago, about the factions, about the series of moves and countermoves that had been accumulating over years, like pressure in a fault line, about the intelligence his people had now gathered that suggested Caruso's operation was larger and better resourced than anyone had estimated, about the way tonight's action, using Lily, told him exactly how far Caruso was willing to go. When he finished, the apartment was very quiet. Lily was asleep. The city outside had settled into its late-night frequency, lower and steadier. Isabella sat with everything he'd told her and felt the walls of her carefully constructed life pressing in from all sides. He's going to come at her again, she said. Not if I find him first. And how long does that take? I don't know. Roman. I genuinely don't know. A week, 3 weeks, longer. He leaned forward slightly, which is why I need you to agree to move, both of you, tonight if possible. Tonight? This address is compromised. Caruso sent someone to your daughter's bus stop. That means he knows where you live, where she goes to school, what her routine looks like. Every hour you stay here is... I know, she said sharply. I know what it means. She stood up, went to Lily's door and looked in. The small sleeping shape, the rise and fall of the blanket, the yellow coat hanging on the hook by the window. The small shoes lined up on the floor with the exactness that Lily always arranged them, a habit Isabella had never been able to explain and had never tried to break because it was just Lily, being Lily, one of the 10,000 small specific things that made her daughter her daughter. She looked at that coat for a long time. Then she turned around. "Give me an hour to pack," she said. Roman was already on his phone, and that was how Isabella Hart walked out of the life she had built and into the one she had spent 9 years running from. Not with a choice exactly, but with the understanding that the choice had already been made for her the moment Roman DeLuca's enemy learned that the man had a daughter he didn't know about, and decided that the best way to destroy a king was to— They moved at 2 in the morning. Roman's people brought 3 vehicles and a specific kind of organized efficiency that Isabella recognized as the muscle memory of people who had done this before. Relocated lives under pressure, packed what mattered and abandoned what didn't, moved through the dark city without drawing the kind of attention that invited questions. She packed 1 large bag for herself and 1 for Lily, choosing with the ruthless economy of someone who understood that what she left behind tonight she might not see again for a long time. Lily's stuffed rabbit, the medication she kept in the cabinet above the bathroom sink, 3 days of school clothes that she folded with hands that moved faster than her thoughts. She did not let herself look at the apartment as a whole. She looked at sections of it, 1 drawer at a time. Lily woke when Isabella lifted her and didn't fully come to consciousness, just stirred, murmured something indistinct, and settled her head against Isabella's shoulder with the complete physical trust of a child who had never had a reason not to trust her mother. That trust was a weight Isabella carried down the stairs and into the waiting vehicle without putting down. Roman rode in the same vehicle. He sat across from them. The SUV had rear-facing seats, and he watched Lily sleep against Isabella's arm with an expression that had no performance in it whatsoever. Isabella caught him looking twice, and both times he didn't look away quickly, the way people do when they're caught at something. He just held it for a moment and then dropped his eyes to the floor, and she didn't know what to do with that, so she filed it somewhere she wasn't ready to open yet. The safe house was a brownstone on a quiet block in Carroll Gardens, Brooklyn. 4 stories, private entrance, the kind of building that had been bought and maintained for exactly this kind of purpose, comfortable enough to live in without feeling like a cage, secure enough that Roman's people had already been through every room by the time they arrived. There were groceries in the refrigerator, clean towels in the bathroom, a bedroom on the 2nd floor with a window that faced the garden, and a bed already made with sheets that smelled like they'd been laundered that day. Isabella put Lily in the bed, sat beside her until she was certain she was truly asleep again, and then came downstairs. Roman was in the kitchen with 2 of his men, Marco Vitelli, who served as his head of security and had the posture and economy of movement of someone who'd come up through military service before drifting somewhere less regulated, and a younger man named Danny Rice, who handled Roman's intelligence operations. They were bent over a laptop on the table, speaking in low voices that stopped when Isabella walked in. "Tell me where we are," she said. Roman looked up. "Sit down." "I don't want to sit down." He looked at her for a second longer, then back at the laptop. "Vitelli." Vitelli turned the screen toward her. It showed a grid of surveillance photographs, grainy, time-stamped, some clearly pulled from public cameras, some from angles that suggested private systems. At the center of the grid was a face she'd seen once before through a car window, when she'd been looking without understanding what she was looking at. Vincent Caruso, 60-something, heavy through the shoulders, the kind of face that had been handsome once and had cured itself of that quality through decades of hard living. The photograph showed him at various locations, a restaurant on Staten Island, a parking garage in the Bronx, what appeared to be a shipping facility somewhere near the water. "We've been tracking his movements for 18 months, Vitelli said. "We had him loosely contained. Tonight changed the calculus." "He escalated," Isabella said. "He revealed his hand, which means he's not worried about containment anymore." Vitelli exchanged a look with Roman that was too fast for Isabella to read. "He's moving toward something." "What something?" Roman straightened. "We don't know yet. That's the problem." He walked to the other side of the kitchen and stood with his back to the counter, arms folded. He looked tired in a specific way. Not physically, but the fatigue of someone managing too many pieces simultaneously and feeling one of them beginning to slip. "What we know is that he's been building resources for 4 years. Money, people, infrastructure. That's not done cheaply or quickly. Whatever he's planning, he's been planning it since before he left the family. Since before you forced him out, Isabella said. A small correction of his expression. Yes. And tonight was him telling you he's ready. Tonight was him telling me he knows where to hit. His voice was flat. He found out about Lily, I don't know how yet, and he used her. That's not the action of a man who's still building. That's the action of a man who's ready to end the game. Danny Rice had been quiet through this, his eyes on the laptop screen, running something in a secondary window. He was younger than the others in the room by at least 10 years. His attention, the focused attention of someone who operated primarily in data and was sometimes surprised when the data had physical consequences. He looked up now. I need to flag something, he said. Roman looked at him. The route. Rice turned the laptop back to face himself and typed something. The route Caruso used to get to the bus stop. I've been running it backward through the camera grid, looking at the approach. He paused. He didn't surveil the school. A beat of quiet. What do you mean? Roman said. He went directly to the bus stop. Not the school, not the building, not any of the other logical contact points. He went straight to the specific stop where the East bus drops on Lexington. He knew the bus, the stop, and the time before he got there. He didn't have to find it. Isabella looked at Roman. Roman was very still. Someone told him, Isabella said. Someone with detailed knowledge of Lily's routine, Rice said. Not just her school, not just her general neighborhood, the specific bus line and the specific stop and the correct timing. He glanced at Roman briefly, then back at the screen. That's not information you get from a distance. That's information you get from close. The kitchen was silent for a moment except for the low hum of the refrigerator. Isabella became aware that something was happening in the room that she wasn't fully reading yet. A current between the three men. Something communicated in the way Vitelli shifted his weight, and Rice stopped looking at anyone, and Roman's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. How close is close? She said. No one answered immediately. Roman. Her voice came out flat and hard and deliberate. How close? Roman unfolded his arms and set his hands on the counter. He looked at her the way he'd looked at her on the sidewalk outside the restaurant, without the performance, without the armor, just the raw face of a man confronting something he doesn't want to be true. We're working on it, he said. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now. Then work faster. She turned and walked out of the kitchen. She went upstairs, checked on Lily again, still asleep, the stuffed rabbit tucked under one arm, and sat on the floor outside the bedroom door with her back against the wall and her knees pulled up. The hallway was quiet and dark except for the thin light coming from under Lily's door. She sat there and breathed and let herself exist in the space of not knowing what came next, which was a space she'd lived in before and had some practice with, even if the stakes had never been exactly like this. She fell asleep sitting up, just for a little while. When she woke, it was nearly 5 a.m, and Roman was sitting on the floor of the hallway, 6 feet away from her with his back against the opposite wall, his legs stretched out in front of him, his coat gone, and his shirt collar open. He was awake. He'd probably been awake the entire time. She looked at him. He looked at her. You should sleep, she said. So should you. I was. I know. I didn't want to move you. She shifted against the wall, working the stiffness out of her neck. What time is it? 4:47. Anything from your people. A pause that lasted 1 second too long. We're getting closer. She heard the pause, filed it. Roman, what are you not telling me? He looked at the ceiling, then back at her. We've narrowed the source of the leak to someone inside my organization. Someone who's been in contact with Caruso for at least the past 8 months. Someone who knew about Lily because he stopped. Because you told them, she said. Because I was trying to determine her situation quietly before I approached you directly. I asked someone I trusted to look into it, discreetly, to confirm what I thought I'd seen. His voice was completely even. It was the evenness of a man holding something very difficult still by main force. I made a decision I believed was correct, and it turned out to be a decision with consequences I didn't predict. Isabella stared at him. You told someone, she said slowly. Before you even came to the restaurant. You had someone investigate my daughter before you looked me in the eye. Yes? And that someone told Caruso. Yes? She stood up. She did it slowly, the way you move when you're not sure how solid your legs are. And then she stood in the hallway and looked down at him and felt something pass through her that was not quite anger yet, was something beneath anger, something more fundamental. The feeling of a woman who has structured her entire existence around one protective imperative and discovered that the structure has a crack she didn't put there and couldn't have predicted. Get up, she said. He stood. You told me, she said, keeping her voice below the level that would wake Lily, that you wanted to earn something, that you wanted to come in slowly and do it right and not blow up what I'd built. I know what I told you. And the first thing you actually did, before any of that, before the conversation on the sidewalk, before the restaurant, was have someone investigate my child without my knowledge. And that investigation is what put her on a bus with a stranger tonight. He didn't deny it. He didn't defend it. He stood in the hallway at 4:47 in the morning and took what she was saying, and she hated him for being able to do that without flinching because it made it harder to stay as angry as the situation required. I know, he said. I know what that cost. I'm not going to tell you it was wrong to be angry. I'm past angry, she said. Isabella, I need you to tell me who it was. Her voice dropped lower. I need to know who in your organization used my daughter to get to you. He was quiet for 2 seconds. His name is Sal Benedetti. He was with my father for 30 years. He's been with me for... I don't care about his history. Where is he now? My people picked him up 2 hours ago. And he's being dealt with. She looked at him a moment longer, then turned and went back into Lily's room and sat in the chair by the window and did not sleep again. The morning came gray and slow. Lily woke at 7:15 and lay still for a moment, taking in the unfamiliar ceiling, before she turned her head and found Isabella, and something in her face relaxed immediately, which was one of the small daily mercies of having a child who trusted you completely. Are we on vacation? Lily asked. Something like that, Isabella said. How do you feel? Hungry. Lily sat up. She looked around the room with the evaluating curiosity she brought to most things. This house is nice. Whose is it? A friend's. Which friend? Someone from a long time ago. Lily considered this with the particular philosophical pragmatism of a 9-year-old who has learned that adults sometimes have histories that are too complicated to explain before breakfast. Can I have eggs? We'll see what there is. They went downstairs. Roman was in the kitchen, which Lily registered with a brief look at Isabella that contained all the questions she'd decided not to ask yet. Roman saw them come in and stood up from the table with a carefulness that was almost formal, like someone who'd practiced exactly this and was now discovering that practicing it had not been sufficient preparation. Lily, Isabella said, this is Roman. She searched for the word. I'm an old friend of your mom's, Roman said. He crouched down slightly, not fully going to one knee, just bringing himself closer to her height. His voice when he did it was different, quieter, the hard professional edges pulled back, something underneath that might have been the voice he would have had in a different life. From a long time ago. Lily looked at him. She was direct in the way that children are direct when they haven't been taught yet to soften their scrutiny. She looked at his face the way she looked at math problems. Not hostile, just thorough. You have the same eyes as me, she said. Roman went very still. Sort of, Lily said, already losing interest, already looking around for the eggs. My teacher says my eyes are unusual. She says she's never seen that color on a kid before. Your teacher's right, Roman said. His voice was slightly unsteady. Lily had already moved to the refrigerator. Isabella looked at Roman over her daughter's head. He looked back at her, and whatever she saw in his face in that moment, she turned away from it because it was too much to hold in a kitchen at 7 in the morning with everything else that was happening. She made eggs. Lily ate at the table and talked about a book she'd been reading at school, something about a girl who discovers she can talk to animals, which she thought was mostly realistic except for the part with the horse, because horses were actually very stupid. She'd looked it up. Roman sat across from her and listened with the careful attention of someone memorizing something. He asked one question. Had she finished the book yet? And Lily explained with great authority that she never finished books before she was supposed to, because that would mean she'd have to wait longer for the next thing, which didn't make sense if you thought about it. Roman said that made sense. Lily looked at him with slightly more interest. Isabella watched it happen and felt something she couldn't name shift in the architecture of everything she'd been certain about. Vitelli appeared in the kitchen doorway at 9 and looked at Roman with an expression that meant something had developed. Roman excused himself. Isabella got Lily set up in the living room with her school books. There would be no school today, possibly for several days, and Lily had taken this information with the measured excitement of a child who understood intuitively that the circumstances were serious enough that expressing too much enthusiasm would be incorrect, and then followed Roman into the back hallway. Vitelli was grim. Benedetti talked, Roman said without preamble. Okay, Isabella said. Caruso's plan isn't what we thought. He paused, and at the pause she felt the weight of something much worse than what she already knew coming toward her. He's not after me directly. He's not coming for the organization or the assets or the territory. He looked at her steadily. He's coming for Lily. The hallway went very still around her. He doesn't want to hurt me, Roman said. He wants to take her, keep her, use her as a permanent hold over me, not a short-term leverage play, a long-term control mechanism. Benedetti confirmed he has a location outside the city already prepared. He was never planning to negotiate. He was planning to disappear with her. Isabella stared at him. He already tried once, Roman said. Last night was a test run. He wanted to see how quickly I could respond and what resources I'd deploy. He was measuring the response time. He stopped. He's going to try again, with more people and a better plan. When? Benedetti doesn't know the exact timeline, but based on what he knew about Caruso's logistics, Vitelli said it quietly, days, not weeks. Isabella turned and pressed her back against the wall of the hallway and looked at the ceiling. She breathed, in, out, even. The way she'd learned, the way she always did it, days, not weeks. I need to call my lawyer, she said. I need to… Isabella, Roman's voice. I need to tell you something else. She looked at him. His expression was the expression she'd been watching him keep controlled since the hallway last night. And for the first time, it wasn't fully controlled. Something had gotten through the perimeter. Benedetti told Caruso about Lily 8 months ago, but Caruso knew something before that. He stopped, made himself say it. He's known about her since she was born. The air in the hallway changed temperature. He's had someone watching you, Roman said, for 9 years. Not constantly, not close, just a passive monitor, a check-in every few months. He knew about Lily when she was an infant. He's been keeping that information as an asset, waiting for the right time to use it. He paused. He waited until I came back into your life, until I was invested, until losing her would actually cost me something. Isabella's mouth was dry. 9 years, she said. Yes. While I was raising her. While I thought we were safe. While I thought I'd built something that was away from all of this. Her voice was level and cold and terrible. Someone was watching us for 9 years. Yes. She stepped away from the wall. She walked back to the doorway of the living room and looked in. Lily was on the couch with her textbook open on her knees, her pencil moving in slow circles the way it did when she was working through something, her lower lip slightly pushed out in concentration. The morning light came through the window and landed on the side of her face, and she was so completely ordinary and safe-looking and real that Isabella felt the reality of the last 12 hours attempt to simply break her in half, right there in the doorway. She did not let it. She stepped back into the hallway, looked at Roman, at Vitelli, at the 2 men who represented the world she'd run from and was now, unavoidably, inside of. Tell me what we need to do, she said. Roman looked at her for a moment, at the line of her jaw, at the set of her shoulders, at the particular quality of stillness she'd found in herself that wasn't calm, exactly, but was something that functioned like calm under extreme pressure. He'd seen it once before, a long time ago, and forgotten it. He remembered it now. We need to bring this to an end, he said, not manage it, end it, then end it. That requires… He stopped, started again. What I'm about to propose is going to require you to trust me at a level you have no reason to trust me at. I know that. I'm asking anyway. Talk. We use ourselves as bait, he said. We give Caruso what he thinks he wants, the appearance of an unprotected target. We draw him out from whatever position he's taken, and we finish this on ground we choose instead of ground he chooses. He paused. The alternative is we keep running and defending and waiting for him to find a moment we can't predict. And with Lily, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I can't guarantee her safety indefinitely in a defensive posture. Caruso has time and patience, and he's already demonstrated he knows how to wait, Roman said. We can't outwait him. We have to outmove him. Isabella stood in the hallway of a house she didn't own in a borough she hadn't planned to be in and looked at the man who had blown a hole through the center of the life she'd built. And she thought about 9 years of school pickups and sick nights and carefully chosen neighborhoods and deliberately ordinary routines, all of it shadowed by a surveillance she hadn't known existed. All of it preparation for a threat she hadn't understood was already present. She thought about Lily on the couch with her textbook. "Tell me the plan," she said. Roman told her. It took 2 hours to build out the full structure of it, with Vitelli running logistics and Rice running the communications intercept that would make Caruso believe what Roman needed him to believe. The core of it was simple, the way most dangerous things are simple at their core. Give the enemy what he thinks he wants, control the terms of the delivery, close the trap when he's inside it. The execution was where simple became complicated. The execution required timing and personnel and a specific location that Roman had been thinking about since before dawn, a place he knew and Caruso knew, and that carried its own particular weight of history between the two of them. Red Hook, the old Caruso family warehouse on the water, unused for 4 years since the split. Caruso had retained ownership through a subsidiary. Rice had confirmed it the night before. He'd kept it because he was sentimental about it, or because he was practical about it, or both. Either way, he'd kept it. "He'll expect it to be a trap," Isabella said. "Yes," Roman said, "but he'll also believe he's better prepared than we are. Caruso has always operated from the assumption that his intelligence is superior. Tonight we're going to use that assumption against him." "And if it doesn't work?" Roman looked at her without flinching. "Then we're in a worse position than we are now. But we're already in a position with no good options. This is the least bad one." Isabella thought about that for a moment. "I want to be there." "No. Roman, Lily needs you here. Lily will be here with 3 of your people. She'll be safe for... You are not a variable I can manage in a live operation." "Stop calling me a variable." Her voice came out sharp and level. "I am her mother, and this is my fight too, and if something goes wrong, I will not be sitting in this house. If something goes wrong," he said, "I need to know you're with her. That's not about managing you. That's about what I need to be able to function tonight." He stopped. His voice dropped slightly. "I can't do this if I'm worried about both of you at the same time. I need to know where you are. That's all." She looked at him for a long moment. "If this goes wrong," she said quietly, "and you don't come back, I'll come back. If you don't," he held her gaze, "then you take Lily, and you take the resources I'm going to put in place today, and you disappear somewhere Caruso's people can't find you. Vitelli has the details. It's already arranged." He paused. "But I'm coming back." She wanted to say something about the arrogance of certainty. She didn't. The rest of the day moved the way days move when they're counting down to something. Too fast in the moment she needed to think, and too slow in the moment she needed to stop thinking. Roman spent most of it on the phone and in low conferences with Vitelli. Rice worked his intercept operation from the kitchen table, building the digital architecture of a false signal that would bring Caruso to the warehouse at the right time, thinking he had the upper hand. Isabella stayed with Lily, who was working through her textbook with the focused determination of a child who had decided that the best response to an unusual situation was to be exceptionally good at normal things. At one point, Lily looked up from her work and said, "Roman's nice." Isabella kept her eyes on the window. "You think so?" He listened to the whole thing about the horse. Most adults stop listening after like 30 seconds. "He's a good listener," Isabella said, because it was true and she couldn't think of anything else. "Is he why we're here?" Lily asked. The question was direct in the way Lily's questions always were, aimed precisely at the thing she actually wanted to know. Isabella turned from the window and looked at her daughter. "Yes," she said. "He's helping us with something." Lily considered this with the measured patience of someone who has learned that adults sometimes need time to get to the full story. "Okay," she said, and went back to her textbook. Isabella sat with that okay for the rest of the afternoon. Roman left at 8:30 with Vitelli and 4 others. He stopped in the hallway before going out the front door. Lily was upstairs. Isabella stood at the foot of the stairs, and they looked at each other across the quiet entrance of the brownstone. "Stay near your phone," he said. "I know." He turned to go. "Roman." She said it before she'd decided to say it. He turned back. She looked at him in his coat in the doorway with the night behind him, and the light from the hallway catching the angles of his face, and she thought, 9 years. She thought, Lily's eyes. She thought about all the things she hadn't said on 100 nights when saying them would have meant something and didn't say them now either, because tonight was not the night for them, and she still wasn't sure there was a night for them anywhere in the near future. "Be careful," she said. He nodded and was gone. The warehouse district in Red Hook at 10 at night was a particular kind of dark, the industrial dark of a neighborhood that had never fully decided what it wanted to be, where the lights from the harbor threw broken reflections against loading dock doors and chain-link fencing, and the water moved with the cold indifference of something that had been there before any of the human machinery around it and would be there after. Roman came in from the north with Vitelli and 2 others, using the back route along the waterfront, moving low and quiet in the dark between the containers. The warehouse was a 4-story brick building that had survived every storm and restructuring that had hit Red Hook in the last 40 years by being simply too useful to tear down and too unfashionable to convert. The Caruso name was still on the deed through 3 layers of corporate paper. The loading dock on the south side had been kept functional. There were lights on in the 2nd floor. Roman stopped behind a corrugated steel container 40 meters from the south entrance. He could hear the water. He could hear his own breathing. Vitelli appeared at his left shoulder. 3 vehicles on the north side, Vitelli said, very low. I count at least 6 bodies inside based on heat signature. There might be more. Caruso. One of the heat signatures matches his build, 2nd floor, east side. Roman looked at the lit windows. Yellow light moving slightly. Not fixed lighting, probably lanterns or work lights. Caruso had come expecting a confrontation, which meant he'd come prepared for one. The question was whether prepared meant careful or whether it meant overconfident. In Roman's experience with Vincent Caruso, the answer was always the same. The man had never been able to resist the feeling of walking into a room as the smartest person present. Tonight Roman was counting on that. His earpiece crackled. Rice, from the car 3 blocks away where he was running communications. "The intercept is holding." He received the message at 9:40 and his phone traffic afterwards suggests he believed it. "He thinks you're coming in with 2 people, not 4. "Good," Roman said. "There's one thing." A pause. "His people on the north side. One of them made a call 20 minutes ago. Short call, scrambled. I couldn't decrypt it in time. Could be nothing. Could be a secondary team." Roman processed that. A secondary team meant a secondary objective. A secondary objective, given everything Rice and Benedetti had told him about Caruso's plan, meant his phone buzzed. Isabella. He almost didn't answer it. Then he read the text she'd sent rather than called. 3 words. And the cold that moved through him was a different kind of cold from anything the November harbor air could produce. Someone was here. He typed back, "Inside?" Her response took 4 seconds. 4 seconds was too long. At the window, ground floor, Lily's upstairs. Roman looked at Vitelli. Vitelli had seen his face change and was already waiting. "Secondary team," Roman said. "At the house." Vitelli swore under his breath, quiet and precise, the profanity of a professional registering a serious miscalculation. "How many?" "I don't know." Roman was already moving, already turning back the way they'd come. "Take Garza and Chen inside. Do not let Caruso walk out of that building. I need—" "Roman," Vitelli's voice stopped him. "If you leave now, Caruso sees you pull back. He'll know the operation is compromised. He'll go to ground, and we lose him. Roman knew that. He'd known it the second he read Isabella's message. The choice was already made, had been made the moment Caruso sent a second team to a house where his daughter was sleeping, because there was no version of any decision he would make tonight that put the operation over Lily. Not one version, not even the version that was tactically correct. "I know," he said. "Do the job." He went back through the dark at a run. He drove himself, which he never did on operations. Vitelli's standing rule was that Roman didn't drive himself during active engagements, because a driver was one more person between him and whoever was trying to end him. He drove anyway. He pushed the SUV through the empty streets of Red Hook at speeds that made the traffic lights irrelevant and kept his phone on the seat beside him with the screen lit. Isabella texted again at the third light. "Still there. I can see him from the second floor. He's at the back gate. I don't think he's come in yet." Roman typed one-handed. "Keep Lily in the room. Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone but me." He ran 2 red lights crossing the bridge. The drive was 11 minutes. He did it in 7. He came off the bridge and took the back streets into Carroll Gardens, cutting the headlights on the final block, coasting to a stop 30 meters from the brownstone service entrance. He got out of the vehicle and moved to the back of the SUV for the bag he kept there. The one Vitelli called the contingency bag, which was a polite name for what it actually was, and then moved along the side of the building through the narrow space between the brownstone and its neighbor, keeping low, keeping his back to the brick. The man at the back gate was standing in the shadow of the garden wall with the particular stillness of someone waiting for a signal. He had his back mostly to Roman, young, heavy-set, earpiece visible on the left side. Roman could see in his posture the specific way someone holds themselves when they're nervous but trying to look like they're not. The weight distributed too carefully, the shoulders too controlled. Amateur. Or at least, not the best Caruso had, which meant the best was somewhere else, possibly already inside. Roman's chest tightened. He moved to the back door of the brownstone, the one that opened into the kitchen, and found it locked from the inside, which meant the man in the garden hadn't come through this way. He used his key, moved into the kitchen without turning on the light, and stood still for 3 seconds, letting his eyes and ears adjust. The brownstone was quiet. One of his 3 men was supposed to be on the ground floor. He wasn't at his station. Roman moved out of the kitchen into the hallway. The front room was empty. The second room, the sitting room with the window that faced the street, was empty. He came to the foot of the stairs and looked up. There was a man at the top of the stairs. Not one of his. He was standing with his back to Roman, facing the hallway that led to Lily's room. His attention focused on the door at the end of the corridor. He hadn't heard Roman come in. He was maybe 25, lean, with the short hair and the stance of someone with some kind of training in his background. He had his hand on the door handle of the room at the end of the hall. Lily's room. What happened in the next 8 seconds, Roman would not be able to fully recount afterward, in the way you can't fully recount things that move past the threshold where thought and action are separate processes. He took the stairs fast and quiet, and the man heard him on the 3rd step and turned, and the hand came off the door handle and came up with something in it, and Roman hit him before he could get his arm fully raised. One sharp impact that took him off his feet and into the wall of the hallway, and they went down together in a tangle that Roman came out of on top. And then the man was on the floor and not moving, and Roman was kneeling over him, breathing hard with his hands shaking slightly from adrenaline, and something he recognized was closer to terror than anything he'd felt in years. He looked up. Lily's door was still closed. He went to it, knocked twice, the specific pattern he'd established with Isabella before he left. 2 slow and 1 fast. A pause that lasted too long, and then the sound of the lock disengaging, and then the door opened, and Isabella was standing there with Lily behind her, Lily's face just visible over her mother's shoulder, wide awake and pale and frightened, but unharmed. "Are you hurt?" Roman said. "No." Isabella's voice was steady in the way it got steady when it was holding a great deal of weight. Her eyes went past him to the man on the floor of the hallway, then back to him. "Your man on the ground floor. I know. I'll find him." He looked at Lily. "Hey." He kept his voice level and calm and mostly succeeded. "Everything's okay. You're safe." Lily looked at him, then at the man on the floor, then back at Roman, and in her face was the arithmetic of a 9-year-old adding things together very quickly. The house, the disrupted routine, her mother's carefully maintained calm, this man who had her eyes standing in the hallway over someone unconscious at 2 in the morning, arriving at a sum that her 9 years of experience was not quite large enough to hold. "You're not just my mom's friend," she said. Roman looked at her. "Are you?" Isabella made a small sound, not quite a breath, not quite a word. Roman crouched down to Lily's level. He was still breathing hard from the stairs. His hands had mostly stopped shaking. He looked at his daughter, at the dark hair and the particular eyes and the jaw that was Isabella's jaw, and the stubborn directness that he had no business recognizing as his own, except that he did. And he said the only thing that was true. "No," he said, "I'm not." Lily looked at him for a long time with the thorough, unhurried assessment she brought to things she needed to understand completely. Then she looked at her mother, then back at him. "Okay," she said. "But who's that guy on the floor?" Before Roman could answer, his phone rang. Vitelli. He stood and answered it in the hallway, one eye on Lily and one eye on the door at the end of the corridor. "It's done," Vitelli said. He sounded like a man who had been in a fight recently. "Caruso is contained. 3 of his people are down. 2 are in custody." A pause. "But Roman..." Something in Vitelli's voice. "What?" "Caruso's talking." Another pause. "He says the secondary team wasn't just for the girl." Roman went still. "He says there's a third element we didn't account for, something he put in place months ago, before he knew you'd found out about your daughter, something already positioned." Vitelli's voice was careful, in the specific way of someone delivering information they haven't finished verifying but can't afford to sit on. "He says the order is already out. He says it doesn't matter that we have him. The order is already out, and it goes to someone inside the building with you right now, and the target isn't Lily." The hallway was very quiet. "The target is Isabella," Vitelli said. Roman turned around. One of the 3 men he'd left to guard the house was standing at the end of the hallway. Not the man from the stairs. One of his own men, Marcus Webb, who had been with him for 3 years, who Vitelli had personally vetted, who Roman had trusted without question in every operation for 36 months. He was standing at the end of the hallway with a look on his face that was the specific look of a man who has just been made, who knows the time for waiting is over, who has a gun in his hand already coming up. Isabella was standing directly between Roman and the end of the hallway. "Get down," Roman said. She didn't hesitate. She dropped. Roman moved. The hallway erupted into noise and motion and the kind of compressed violence that happens in tight spaces when there's no room for anything except the most direct possible line between 2 points. And somewhere behind him, he heard Lily scream once, not in the sustained way of a child in ongoing danger, but in the short, sharp way of a child who has witnessed one terrible second of something and then had it end. And Roman reached Marcus Webb at the exact moment that Webb's second shot went into the wall where Isabella had been standing. And then they were against the wall together, and Roman had his forearm across Webb's throat, and Webb's gun arm was pinned, and they were struggling in the narrow space with the pure physical desperation of 2 men who both understood exactly what was at stake. Webb was strong, younger than Roman by 8 years and built for exactly this kind of work. Roman could feel the difference in the way the struggle moved. The push and give of 2 bodies matched closely enough that it wasn't going to resolve quickly, and every second it didn't resolve was a second that Lily was in the room behind him, and Isabella was on the floor of the hallway between them and the front of the house where 2 more men might or might not be compromised. He felt the gun arm shift. Webb was trying to angle it. Roman drove his knee up and felt contact and heard Webb's breath go out in a hard grunt, and the arm dropped slightly. He used the drop. One move, fast and final, and Marcus Webb's head hit the wall and he went down and the gun hit the floor and skittered and came to rest against the baseboard 3 feet from where Isabella was already sitting up. She looked at the gun. She looked at Roman. She looked at Webb on the floor. The hallway was silent except for Roman's breathing, hard and uneven, the breathing of a man who has been running and fighting for the past 20 minutes and is not done yet, doesn't know if he's done yet, and the distant sound of the city outside, utterly indifferent, going on. From behind the door, Lily's voice. Mom? Isabella got to her feet. Her hands were steady. Her voice, when she answered, was steady. I'm here, baby. Stay in the room. She looked at Roman. He was standing over Webb with his chest heaving and blood on his hand from somewhere. His knuckle, a cut from the wall, something that hadn't registered as pain yet because the adrenaline was still too loud. She looked at the blood. She looked at his face. Is it over? She asked. His phone was still in his hand. Vitelli's voice was still coming through it, thin and distant, saying his name. He put the phone to his ear. Vitelli. Roman, are you? I'm standing. He looked down at Webb, at the gun against the baseboard, at the hallway that was his daughter's hallway in the house where his daughter was supposed to be safe. Is Caruso completely contained? Yes, he's not going anywhere. And the order he gave, Webb was the only, as far as I can confirm right now, yes. But Roman, I need you to, is there anyone else in that building I should know about? A pause. No. Your other two men are clean. I've just spoken to both of them. Webb was the only one Caruso had access to. Roman exhaled. It was not a relieved sound. It was the sound of a man releasing pressure that had been building since 8:30 the previous night, and the release didn't feel like relief because there was too much still sitting on top of it. He lowered the phone. Isabella was still looking at him. She hadn't moved to the door yet, hadn't gone back to Lily, which told him she was waiting for something, for the all clear, for confirmation, for whatever signal would let her stop being the woman managing a crisis and start being the mother on the other side of that door. He nodded. She turned and went to the door and opened it, and Lily came out of the room fast and hit her mother at full speed, arms around her waist, face pressed into Isabella's shoulder, and Isabella's arms came around her and held her with the complete and practiced certainty of 9 years of knowing exactly how to hold this specific person. Roman stood in the hallway and watched them. His knuckle was bleeding onto the floor, his breathing was still uneven. Everything that had been moving at operational speed was beginning to decelerate now, the way it always did after something like this, the adrenaline dropping back and leaving everything it had been covering exposed to the air. He looked at his daughter, with her face buried in her mother's shoulder, and he looked at Isabella with her eyes closed over the top of Lily's head, and he thought about 9 years, and about all the nights in all those years that had led to this hallway, this moment, this specific intersection of everything he'd built, and everything he'd lost, and everything he'd only just understood he had. Lily lifted her face from Isabella's shoulder and looked at him over her mother's arm. Her eyes, his eyes, the ones the teacher had never seen on a kid before, were wet. She'd been crying. She looked at him with the direct, unfiltered assessment she'd been using on him since the kitchen that morning, and then she said quietly and with the simple precision of a child who has decided something, "Are you going to stay?" The hallway went completely still. Roman looked at her face, at the question hanging in the air between them with all its weight and all its simplicity and all the years of its answer already accumulated somewhere behind his sternum, pressing outward. He opened his mouth, and from the front of the house, from the direction of the ground floor where he'd left 2 men he now knew were clean, came the sound of the front door opening, and it was Vitelli. He came through the front door with Garza behind him, both of them carrying the specific worn-down quality of men who had been in a fight and finished it and were still running on the chemistry of that, not quite landed yet. Vitelli had a cut above his left eye that had bled down the side of his face and dried there. Garza was holding his right arm slightly away from his body, in the way of someone with bruised ribs who hasn't decided yet how much it hurts. Vitelli took in the hallway, Webb on the floor, the gun against the baseboard, the blood on Roman's hand, Isabella and Lily in the doorway, in one long sweep, and his expression shifted through several things very quickly before settling into the professional blankness he wore when he was processing a situation that exceeded what he'd been prepared for. "Caruso is in custody," he said. "Real custody. I called in a contact at the federal level, someone who's been building a case against his operation for 18 months. Caruso walks into their hands tonight. The case files get the evidence they've needed, and he doesn't walk back out." He paused. "It's done." Roman looked at him. "It's done," Vitelli said again, more quietly, like the repetition was for both of them. Roman nodded once. Then he bent down, picked up Webb's gun from the baseboard, cleared it with the practiced motion of long habit, and set it on the narrow hallway table beside a ceramic bowl where someone had left a set of keys. He straightened up. He looked at his hand. The cut on his knuckle had mostly stopped bleeding, a thin dark line across the joint, not serious. He pressed it against his coat. Lily had not let go of Isabella, but she was watching Roman. She'd been watching him since she'd asked her question, and the front door had interrupted whatever answer he'd been about to give, and she was still watching him now with the particular patience of a child who has decided she will wait as long as necessary for the thing she wants to understand. He looked at her. "You asked me something," he said. Lily nodded. "Give me a few minutes," he said, "and then I'll answer it properly." She considered this. Then she nodded again with the solemn authority of someone granting an extension they could reasonably withhold. Isabella met his eyes over the top of their daughter's head. Her expression was unreadable in the specific way it got unreadable when she was reading everything and not ready to show it yet. He held her gaze for a moment, then looked at Vitelli. "Get Webb out of this hallway," he said, "and get someone to look at that eye." He went downstairs. The kitchen was the only room in the brownstone that felt fully itself at 3 in the morning. The overhead light harsh and steady, the refrigerator humming, the groceries someone had stocked sitting undisturbed in their ordinary arrangement on the counter. Roman stood at the sink and ran cold water over his hand and watched the thin diluted pink of it circle the drain. He stayed there until the water ran clear. Then he turned off the tap and stood with his hands braced on the edge of the sink and his head down and breathed. In the operational hours since 8:30 the previous evening, he had driven across the city, fought 2 men in a hallway, discovered a traitor in his own organization, and watched his daughter's face in the aftermath of all of it. His body was beginning to compile the invoice for what that had cost. His left shoulder ached from the impact against the wall. His ribs on the right side were sore in a way that would be worse in the morning. The cut on his knuckle had opened again in the water. He was 41 years old, and he had spent the better part of 20 years inside a world that paid its debts in exactly this currency. Pain, damage, the slow compound interest of violence. And standing at a kitchen sink in Carroll Gardens at 3 in the morning, he understood, with the clarity that only comes when the adrenaline is fully gone and there's nothing left between you and the actual contents of your own life, that he was tired of paying it. He heard footsteps on the stairs. Then Isabella came into the kitchen. She'd put Lily back to bed. He could tell by the particular quality of quiet she was carrying, the settled quality of a parent who has successfully got a frightened child to sleep and is now standing in the aftermath of everything she didn't let herself feel while doing it. She stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at him at the sink and didn't say anything right away. He straightened up, turned around. "Lily's asleep?" he said. Finally. She came into the kitchen, pulled out a chair at the table and sat down, not with the deliberate care of someone choosing a position, but with the simple gravity of someone whose legs have had enough. She put her elbows on the table and her face briefly in her hands and then raised her head. "Garza's outside her door." "Good. Is it over?" Not the way she'd asked it in the hallway, which had been a question with an edge of desperation in it. This was quieter, more tired, already half knowing the answer and needing to hear it said. "Caruso is in federal hands," Roman said. "The case against him has been building for a year and a half. They have enough to put him away for the rest of his life. He'll be processed tonight, arraigned tomorrow. His network doesn't have a structure that survives his removal. Without him, it fragments." He paused. "It's over." Isabella looked at the table. "Webb," she said. "He'll be dealt with through the federal contact. He's tied to Caruso's operation now. The evidence will reflect that." He said it neutrally, without the kind of elaboration that would require her to decide how much she wanted to know. She didn't ask for more. She was quiet for a moment, tracing a small circle on the table with her fingertip. "How did Caruso get to him?" "Money, mostly. Webb's sister has medical debt. Significant. Caruso found it 8 months ago and used it." Roman's voice was even. He was good at finding the places where people were already bent. It's what he'd always done. "And you didn't know?" "No." She looked up. "Do you have other people like that? People he could have gotten to?" "I'm going to find out." He said it the way he said things he meant completely. Every person in my organization is going to be looked at. Every financial situation, every connection, every point of vulnerability. It won't happen again. Isabella held his gaze. That's not actually what I was asking. A beat. I know, he said. She was asking whether the world he lived in would always produce this. The Webbs, the Benedettis, the mechanisms by which people who were supposed to be trusted found their way to the other side of that trust. She was asking whether Lily would always be living inside the radius of that possibility. He knew it was the real question, and he knew she deserved a real answer, which meant he couldn't give her the easy one. Yes, he said, as long as I run what I run, there will always be that risk. She looked at him. Which is why, he said, I've been thinking about what I run. The kitchen was quiet. Somewhere above them, the building settled with the small sounds old buildings make at night. Talk, she said. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. For the first time since she'd known him as an adult, he looked his age. Not old, but fully inhabited, the way a face looks when it's stopped protecting itself for a moment and is just present. My father built an empire, he said, and I maintained it. And for a long time, maintaining it felt like the only coherent thing to do with my life, because it was the only thing I'd been built for and the only language I was fluent in. He stopped. Tonight, I watched a man try to put a gun on you in the hallway where my daughter was sleeping. And I'm sitting here at 3 a.m. thinking about what I maintain and why I maintain it and whether the answer I've been giving myself for 20 years still holds. Does it? Isabella asked. No, he said, without drama, without the performance of a man making a grand decision, just the flat fact of something that had become true. It doesn't. She was quiet for a long time after that. Long enough that the refrigerator cycled through a full hum and the building settled again, and somewhere outside a car passed on the empty street. I need you to understand something, she said finally. I'm not going to be the reason you make that decision. I'm not going to be the thing you point to. You make it because you've made it, or you don't make it at all. I know. And it's not going to fix 9 years. I know that too. And I'm not... She stopped, reorganized. I'm not standing here telling you I've forgiven everything, or that I know what comes next, or that any of this is simple, because it's not. It's 9 years and a daughter who doesn't know who you are, and a world you've built that I still don't fully trust, and a version of you that I'm only beginning to understand. She pressed her palms flat on the table. What I'm saying is that tonight changed the calculation. What you did tonight, for her and for me, I see it. I'm not going to pretend I don't see it. Roman looked at her hands on the table, then at her face. I'll take that, he said. The sun came up over Brooklyn at 6:47. Roman knew the exact time because he watched it happen from the kitchen window. The gray first, then the specific quality of light that precedes color, then the low orange that came in between the buildings on the east side of the block and laid itself across the kitchen floor in a long stripe. He'd been sitting at the table for 3 hours. Isabella had gone upstairs at 4, after the conversation had exhausted itself into something that wasn't resolution but was honest, which he thought was probably the best available thing. He heard Lily before he saw her, the small sounds of a 9-year-old descending stairs, the deliberate footfall, the pause at the bottom, the almost silent approach of a child who isn't sure what she's walking into. She appeared in the kitchen doorway in her pajamas, with her hair loose and her rabbit under one arm, and she looked at Roman at the table with the morning light on him, and she said, "You stayed." "I stayed," he said. She came to the table and sat in the chair Isabella had used. She put the rabbit on the table in front of her and looked at it, and then at him. "You were going to answer my question," she said. "I was." "Last night, in the hallway. You were about to answer it, and then the door—" "I know." He looked at her, at his daughter in her pajamas at 6:47 in the morning with her hair loose and her rabbit, and his eyes. "You asked if I was going to stay." "Yeah." He thought about the right way to say it, thought about what it cost to say the simple thing and what it cost not to. "I want to," he said. "Very much. But there are things your mom and I need to work out first. And there are things I need to explain to you. Not today, maybe not for a while, but eventually. That are going to be hard to explain, and that you deserve to hear right." He held her gaze. What I can tell you right now is that I'm not going anywhere. Whatever that looks like, whatever the terms are, I'm here." Lily looked at him with the assessing thoroughness that he was beginning to understand was simply the way she looked at everything she took seriously. "Are you my dad?" she asked. The morning light moved slightly as a cloud passed somewhere above the city. "Yes," Roman said. Lily looked at the rabbit. She straightened its ear, which had been folded over, and set it back in front of her. She appeared to be processing something. "Mom knew?" she said. "Yes." "And she didn't tell me." "No, she was trying to keep you safe." He said it without defense or deflection because Lily was 9 and not foolish and would recognize either. From my world, which she was right to try, last night being some evidence of that. Lily appeared to consider this as a reasonable argument. "Are we safe now?" "Yes." "Really?" "Really." She looked at him directly. "How do you know?" "Because the man who is trying to hurt us has been stopped," Roman said, "and because I'm going to spend a very long time making sure it stays that way. That's the only answer I can give you that's honest, and I'd rather give you an honest one than an easy one." Lily seemed to find this acceptable. She picked up the rabbit and held it in her lap and looked out the window at the morning coming in. "My teacher said my dad probably wasn't around," she said to the window. "Last year, when we did the family tree project, she said some families have 2 moms or 2 dads or just one parent, and that's just how it is." She paused. "I told her I just had my mom. She said that was fine." Roman said nothing. There wasn't anything to say that wouldn't diminish the weight of what she'd just handed him. He let it sit between them in the morning light and felt it the way it needed to be felt. Not managed, not moved past, just felt. "It is fine," he said eventually. "What your mom built for you. It's more than fine. It's—" He stopped. "She did something I couldn't have done. I need you to know that." Lily looked at him. "She's pretty tough," she said. "Yes," he said. "She is." "You're tough too," Lily said, with the assessing tone of someone delivering a verdict. "I saw the hallway." "You shouldn't have seen the hallway." "I was scared." "I know. I'm sorry." She seemed to accept the apology with the pragmatism she applied to most things. Then she stood up, tucking the rabbit under her arm. "I'm hungry," she said. "Do you know how to make eggs?" He looked at her. "I know how to make eggs." "Mom makes them wrong. She doesn't put enough salt." "How do you know what the right amount of salt is?" "I just know," Lily said, with the absolute confidence of a 9-year-old on a topic she has decided she is authoritative about. Roman stood up and went to the refrigerator. He made eggs. He put the right amount of salt in them, by Lily's running commentary and one adjustment. She sat at the kitchen table and talked about the book with the girl who could communicate with animals, picking up exactly where she'd left off the morning before, as if the intervening hours hadn't happened, or as if they had happened, and she'd decided to set them in a different part of herself for now and get back to them when she was ready. He listened and asked questions and scrambled eggs in a kitchen in Brooklyn in the early morning and felt the strangeness and the ordinary simultaneity of it, the most domestic scene imaginable, on the other side of the most violent night of his adult life. Isabella came downstairs at 7:30. She was dressed. She'd slept 2 hours at most and showed it, the dark circles deeper, her hair pulled back in the loose knot it always fought its way into. She came into the kitchen and stopped. Lily was eating eggs at the table. Roman was washing the pan at the sink. The morning light was fully present now, coming through the window at the angle it would come through at this time of year. And the kitchen smelled like coffee because Roman had found the coffee and made it and poured a cup that was sitting on the counter waiting. Isabella looked at the cup. Then she looked at Roman. He said nothing. She said nothing. The entire weight of what had happened and what had been said and what had been decided and what was still undecided passed between them in a silence that Lily either didn't notice or was politely ignoring. Isabella picked up the coffee, took a sip, set it back down. "Salt?" she said, looking at Lily's plate. "He puts the right amount," Lily said. Isabella looked at Roman. "I put the right amount," he said. Something moved in her expression. Not quite a smile, but the specific precursor to one that happens when something unexpectedly ordinary breaks through after extraordinary things. She picked up the coffee again and sat at the table, and the three of them were in the kitchen together in the morning, And it was imperfect, and it was fragile, and it was loaded with every unanswered question, and every year not recovered, and every hard conversation not yet had. And it was also, simply and undeniably, real. 3 weeks later, Roman began the process of dismantling the structural elements of what his father had built. He did it methodically, the way he'd always done things, without announcement, without drama, through a series of legal, financial, and organizational decisions that he'd been preparing since the morning in the Carroll Gardens kitchen when he'd watched the sun come up and understood that the life he'd maintained was a form of debt he was done paying. Some people inside the organization understood. Some didn't. Some left. He let them leave. The architecture of it was complex and would take a long time to fully resolve, and he was honest with himself and with Vitelli, who stayed, about the fact that it would never be entirely clean. Nothing built over decades was ever entirely clean when you took it apart. He was honest about that with Isabella too, in one of the conversations they had in the weeks that followed. There were many conversations. Some of them were hard in the way of conversations between people who have years of unprocessed things between them and have decided for the first time to actually process them. Roman told her about Sicily, the full version, not the compressed one he'd given her on the sidewalk. His father's decision, the isolation of it, the year and a half that had felt like a sentence rather than a protection, and the return to New York that had found her gone and had carved something out of him that he'd spent years filling with the wrong material. Isabella listened. She asked the precise, difficult questions she always asked. She said, near the end of one of those evenings, that she understood it and that understanding it didn't make it not hurt, and that both of those things were true at the same time. He said he knew. She said she needed him to keep knowing it, not as a one-time acknowledgement, but as an ongoing fact of whatever they were building. He said he would. She looked at him for a long time after that, and he could see her deciding something, the slow movement of someone weighing a thing they've been weighing for a long time and have finally brought to a conclusion. She didn't say what she'd decided that night, but she let him drive her and Lily home. They'd gone back to the apartment on the Upper West Side, which had been swept and secured and which Roman had arranged additional protection for without making it visible, because visible would have been a line Isabella would not have allowed him to cross. He drove them home and walked them to the door, and Lily said goodnight with the casual directness she'd adopted toward him almost immediately, as if having decided he was acceptable, she saw no reason to be formal about it. Isabella stood in the doorway and looked at him on the landing. "Same time Saturday?" she said. They'd been doing Saturdays. Breakfast, something with Lily, the slow, careful work of building something that didn't have a name yet. "Same time Saturday," he said. She started to close the door. Then she stopped. Roman. He looked at her. She was quiet for a moment, with her hand on the door and the light from the apartment behind her and the years of everything between them. "I'm glad you came back," she said. "Not—" She shook her head slightly. "Not the way things happened, not the cost of it. But you. I'm glad you came back." He held that for a moment, let it mean what it meant without adding to it or reducing it. "So am I," he said. She closed the door. He stood on the landing for a few seconds. Then he went downstairs and into the night. November turned into December. The city shifted into its winter version. The cold more serious, the light going early, the streets developing the particular energy of a place that has decided to make something of the dark. Roman moved through it with the attention of a man learning to inhabit a different version of himself, which was sometimes disorienting and sometimes felt more like relief than anything he could name. On a Saturday in early December, the three of them went to Central Park. Lily's idea, presented to her mother with the managing authority she brought to most suggestions she considered non-negotiable. There was something she wanted to show them, a particular area near the conservatory garden where someone had placed a series of small painted stones along the path, which she'd seen on a school trip and considered remarkable and wanted to discuss with two people simultaneously. They walked. The park was quiet in the way parks are quiet on cold December mornings. The light thin and silver, the trees stripped back to their structures, the ground hard underfoot. Lily walked between them for a while, and then ahead of them, the yellow coat bright against the gray of the morning, her breath making small clouds as she talked about the stones and what kind of person she thought left them there, and what she would paint on a stone if she were going to do it. Roman and Isabella walked at the pace she set, a few feet behind her, and the silence between them was the specific silence of people who have said enough difficult things recently that the easy quiet has become available again. "She's going to want a dog," Isabella said. "She mentioned it to me last week. She mentions it to me every week." A pause. "She's going to get one eventually. She just doesn't know I've already decided." "What kind?" "Something medium. Not a small dog. She has opinions about small dogs." "Strong ones," Roman said. He'd heard them. Isabella glanced at him sideways. The corners of her mouth moved. Not quite the smile, but the thing before it, the thing he'd been cataloging for the past 3 weeks, with the attention of someone who has been given access to something valuable and intends to pay the appropriate respect to it. Ahead of them, Lily had found the stones. She crouched down on the path and examined them with both hands on her knees, turning one over, checking the underside. She called back to them without turning around. "Come look at this one, it has a fish on it," with the confidence of someone who has no doubt the people she's talking to are paying attention. They went to look at the fish. The stone was small and flat, and someone had painted it with careful detail. A blue fish with an orange eye and small, precise scales. The kind of thing that required time and patience, and the decision to make something beautiful for no reason except that it could be made. Lily held it in her palm, and they all looked at it in the December light. "What would you paint?" Lily asked Roman. Direct, the way she always was. He looked at the stone in her hand. He thought about it. "A door," he said. Lily considered this. "Why a door?" "Because a door means something else is possible," he said. "Something you haven't been through yet." She turned the stone over in her hand, thinking about this with the thoroughness she gave ideas she found worth thinking about. "I'd paint a rabbit," she said. "Obviously." She set the stone back carefully where she'd found it, exactly as she'd found it, with the small, precise placement of someone who understands that things left for others should be left as found. She stood up. "Can we get hot chocolate?" "Yes," Isabella said. "There's a cart near the 72nd Street entrance," Roman said. "They make it with actual chocolate." Lily looked at him with the specific expression she got when he produced useful information. "How do you know that?" "I know things," he said. "That's not an answer." "It's the same answer you gave me about the salt." She stared at him. Then she turned and started walking in the direction of 72nd Street with the decisive momentum of someone whose mind is now on hot chocolate. "Fine," she said to the path ahead of her. Isabella looked at Roman. He looked at her. The silver light sat on everything. The bare trees, the hard path, the small, bright figure of their daughter moving ahead of them through the winter park. And the city went on around them in all its noise and indifference, and the years they'd lost were still lost, and the cost of everything that had happened was still present, and would not be resolved by a morning in a park or by any single thing, because that was not how cost worked. But the morning was also true. The hot chocolate would be true. The stone with the fish on it was still sitting on the path behind them, real and specific and made with care by someone they would never meet. Isabella started walking. Roman walked beside her. Neither of them said anything, and neither of them needed to, and somewhere ahead of them Lily was already at the cart asking with great authority about the chocolate, and the cold air moved through the park and carried their breath away behind them as they walked. And the city held all of it, the past and the damage and the stubborn, improbable present, the way cities hold everything, without judgment, without resolution, in the ongoing fact of itself. Just the three of them. Enough.